dear diary, let's have a little look what you've got in store for me today. What's on the old agenda? Okay, that's interesting. Didn't know. Okay, yeah. That might be a good idea. I'm sure the people wouldn't really mind. Oh my goodness. Pardon me. I'm terribly sorry. Where are my manners? My name is Jack, and welcome to my YouTube channel. And you are currently watching The Doctor's Diary. So what are we going to be discussing in today's video? Well, in today's video, we are going to be discussing a little incy-bitsy, teeny tiny little TV show that you've probably never heard of in your lives, known as Doctor Who. But what is Doctor Who? Some of you may not have a clue what I'm on about. Well, let me elaborate for you. So Doctor Who started in 1963, and William Hartnell was in the starring role as a mysterious character known as the Doctor, which we later found out that the Doctor is a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, who goes on various adventures in his police box known as the TARDIS, which stands for Time and Relative Dimensions in Space. And it's a time machine, stuck as a police public call box. And he goes on many adventures with various companions by his side, across the universe, saving planets from deadly evils. And this has managed to go on many adventures over time and has crossed many important milestones. It's reached a 10th anniversary, a 20th anniversary, a 25th anniversary, a 50th anniversary, and last year it celebrated its 60th anniversary of the show, which was brilliant. But how has this show managed to survive for over 60 years? Well, that's through a very unique concept, which is going to be the core focus of today's video, and that is regeneration. But what is regeneration? Well, regeneration, when the Doctor is injured in battle, maybe he's been poisoned, maybe it's just old age and the body's wearing a bit thin, he's able to regenerate into a new one, where his personality might change, his face changes into that of a new person completely, but he's still the Doctor at heart. And over the years, we have seen 15 different actors take on the role of the Doctor, from the first one being William Hartnell, all the way to the current actor of Ncuti Gatwa, each bringing their own unique flavour to the role. Some people have personal preferences on who their favourite actor is, or actress, as we have had some female incarnations of the Doctor as well, played by Jo Martin and Jodie Whittaker, both fantastic actresses. So today's video, I thought it would be an interesting idea if we sat down and ranked each incarnation of the Doctor, so that you can get an idea of who my Doctor is. Everyone's Doctor is different, and that's okay. So this is just my list. And if you disagree with it, that's okay. If you agree with it, that's great too. We're all different, unique human beings at heart. So I want you to sit back, grab your sonic screwdrivers, maybe get yourself a bag of jelly babies, and sit back, relax, and enjoy my ranking of all 15 actors who have played the list. The Doctor Who, ranking the Doctors 1 to 15 tier list. We've got all the Doctors lined up down the bottom down here, including John Hurt's War Doctor and Jo Martin's Fugitive Doctor. So all we're going to do is I'm going to go in order from William Hartnell to Ncuti Gatwa, and I'm going to be placing them in the corresponding column on the tier list, based on my personal opinion. Remember, my list will look completely different to most, if not almost all of your lists, but that's okay. And if you want to tell me in the comment section below who your favourite Doctor is, feel free. I would love to hear that. So let's have a little look at some of these columns we've got. So on the bottom here, we've got rid the universe of your filth. Then we've got sometimes the only choices you have are bad ones, but you still have to choose. Then we've got where there's tears, there's hope. Then we've got fantastic. And then top of the tiers, we've got you may be a Doctor, but I am the Doctor. The original, you might say. So, we will begin this tier list with the first Doctor, played by Mr. William Hartnell. Now, William Hartnell, as the original Doctor, I think deserves a lot of love and respect, as I'm sure many people will agree. Placing him on the tier list is going to be quite difficult. How I'm going to also do these tier lists is I'm going to base them on a few different categories. Firstly, I'm going to base them on how I feel their incarnation acts in the show. I'm also going to do it based on the arcs that they go through, and just their era in general, really. So there's going to be lots of different factors that will influence my decision, as well as nostalgia, who I grew up with, and who I'm still enjoying to this day. But anyway, William Hartnell's first Doctor. Now, his Doctor goes through a bit of an arc, and I'm sure we can all agree. Comparing William Hartnell from his first season to his last series is almost not fair. His first series, he's very dark, he's very mysterious, he's very grumpy, he's very stubborn. He practically kidnaps his first companions. He doesn't really show much in terms of compassion, but as the series goes on, he develops those qualities that we sort of give to the Doctors of the modern generation now. He's very kind and caring. He will always go out of his way to help someone in need. And he's had many, many companions over the time. I would say my personal favourite TARDIS team for the first Doctor would definitely have to be the first Doctor, Ian, Barbara and Vicky. As the very first William Hartnell story I saw was The Web Planet. So they were the TARDIS team that I saw first with him. I would definitely say Hartnell deserves to be, I think, based on the arc that he goes through, and I do have a lot of favourite stories for the first Doctor, I'm going to put him in fantastic. And I think that is quite fair. He doesn't quite make it into the top 3, but I do really enjoy the first Doctor. The second Doctor, now obviously the concept of regeneration was still fresh with this Doctor, and for most audiences they were probably a bit confused and still a bit sad on not having William Hartnell in the role anymore. But I think Patrick Troughton does a fantastic job, and there's lots of Doctors that will be coming up in this list that sort of borrow a lot from Troughton. Like Troughton, compared to Hartnell, is a very clown-like, silly, goofy Doctor who is always running and jumping around. He's always grabbing his companions' hands. He loves playing musical instruments. He has the signature recorder. He has a very strange hat that he wears in his early days, but we don't really talk about that. And he has some fantastic companions, one of which is fan favourite Jamie McCrimmon, who is brilliant. But he also has Victoria, Ben, Polly, who carry over from the first Doctor, and also Zoe. So some of my favourite stories of Troughton, The Mind Robber springs to mind, The Invasion, Tomb of the Cybermen is another favourite of mine, as that was the very first one I ever watched. He also introduces classic villains such as the Ice Warriors and the Yeti, which the Ice Warriors are my favourite Doctor Who villains. I think for Patrick Troughton, I would probably say he, like Hartnell for me, is another fantastic Doctor in the role. I think he does a really, really good job. He's very different to Hartnell. So actually, I think for that reason, No. We'll see how the tier list goes on. But I think they are both very similar. What Hartnell doesn't have, Troughton has, and what Troughton has, Hartnell lacked a little bit. The character arc is there, and he's changing over time. So I think fantastic is about right for the second Doctor. Now, we go into the transition of the 1970s, and we skip into colour with Jon Pertwee as the third incarnation of the Doctor. And this is already where I can see that I'm going to have to make some adjustments to the tier list, because comparing Jon Pertwee to the others, he's a step above, definitely for me anyway, he's a step above Hartnell. So I'm immediately going to have to do this and put Hartnell in where there's tears, there's hope, and then move Troughton. Troughton can stay in fantastic. So I do prefer Troughton to Hartnell. But Jon Pertwee, need I say more? His run is almost flawless. There's very few Third Doctor stories that I don't like. I love the concept of the Doctor being stranded on Earth in exile. I love the fact that he's got to work with humans. I love the introduction of UNIT, the proper introduction of UNIT. The second Doctor did introduce UNIT, and we had a couple of stories of Nicholas Courtney's Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, or Corporal, at the time. But this is where the UNIT family proper solidifies, where you've got the third Doctor teaming up with Brigadier, you've got Mike Yates, you've got Sergeant Benton, you've got companions like Liz Shaw, Joe Grant, and the introduction of Sarah Jane Smith, played by the late, great Elizabeth Sladen. We will love you and miss you forever, Liz. But the third Doctor is a very action hero heavy Doctor. Always getting into fights, always giving little snarky comments. He is brilliant. I always have a laugh watching Jon Pertwee. And he also introduced the Master on our screens with Roger Delgado. And the third Doctor-Master relationship is brilliant, might I add. It's absolutely fantastic. And for that very reason, I've got to put the third Doctor up into the fantastic tier. I think it's only right. Some of my favourite stories include The Three Doctors, Inferno, Spearhead from Space, Planet of the Daleks, Carnival of Monsters. I could go on and on and on. The Sea Devils is another fantastic one. There's very few stories of the third Doctor that I do not enjoy. I would say if I had to choose one that's a little bit weaker, I'd probably say stories like Colony in Space and The Mutants probably spring to mind. They're very slow-paced stories and don't offer a lot for me personally. But overall, Jon Pertwee's Doctor is fantastic. Now, the fourth Doctor, Tom Baker. Now, I straight away have to put him up here. Okay? You may be a Doctor, but I am the Doctor, the original, you might say. Now, there's multiple reasons why Tom Baker is immediately going into the top slot. Firstly, he was the Doctor that introduced the show for me. He was my first Doctor, so he is my Doctor. The very first time I ever watched the show, I was only 6 years old at the time, and I watched The Hand of Fear. So my very first Fourth Doctor story was actually the departure of Sarah Jane Smith. And I instantly clicked with Tom and Liz. They were a superb TARDIS team, and the Fourth Doctor is brilliant. From start to finish, I have a big soft spot for season 18. I know lots of people think season 18 is Tom's weakest season, as you got the change in showrunner to John Nathan Turner, who changed Tom's costume, got rid of the sonic screwdriver, got rid of his more comedic aspects because Tom was a bit of the clown Doctor, silly, but yeah, if he needed to switch on, he would be there. But he thought that the show had got a little bit too silly and so changed it. But I quite like the shift in tone as well. Some memorable stories for Tom Baker's era for me is Pyramids of Mars, The City of Death. I have a big soft spot for Logopolis and Keeper of Traken. I also love stories like The Ark in Space, Genesis of the Daleks, The Seeds of Doom, Talons of Wing Chiang, Horror of Fang Rock, the list goes on. Tom is a fantastic Doctor, with his trademark scarf and always asking people if they want some jelly babies. How can you not love Tom Baker? How can you not love the Fourth Doctor? So he is the first into the top 3 for me of my favourite Doctors of all time. Now, Peter Davison, played by, which is the 5th incarnation of the Doctor. Sorry, I was about to say Peter Davison played by the 5th Doctor. No, the 5th Doctor played by Peter Davison. A fantastic Doctor as well. A big contrast to Tom Baker. And he had big shoes to fill. Tom Baker stayed in the role for 7 years. So Peter had a lot to do. It was a tall order to fill, but he managed to do it, and he had some really good stories in his run, and a fair few amount of companions as well. Carrying over Adric, Nyssa and Tegan from the Fourth Doctor's era, he then also had to witness one of the first companion deaths in Adric. We did have a previous death of a companion, so to speak, in Katarina from the First Doctor's era. But the first true one that we can see on screen in Adric, which played silent credits at the end of the story Earthshock, which also featured the return of the Cybermen, and is a fan favourite story. It's one of my personal favourites. I'd say Earthshock, Caves of Androzani, The Five Doctors, and Resurrection of the Daleks spring to mind when I think of Fifth Doctor stories that you need to watch. But the Fifth Doctor was a very gentle Doctor compared to his predecessors, especially compared to Tom Baker and John Pertwee. He very rarely raised his voice, and usually if he did, he usually was very passive-aggressive in the way he addressed his companions and foes. He'd give them a few snarky comments, a few cheeky looks. He had a great relationship with Anthony Ainley, who played the Master as well. It was almost like Roger Delgado 2.0. And his tenure was brilliant and took the show through the 20th anniversary. He donned a very unique attire as well, almost like a full cricket gear, and his iconic stick of celery, which I think is just brilliant, might I add. I think the Fifth Doctor, for me, also deserves to go into Fantastic. Now, we move on to the Sixth Doctor, played by Mr. Colin Baker. Now, if you'd asked me probably 5 years ago, where would I put the Sixth Doctor, I would probably say he'd be down here. I'd probably say he'd be close to the bottom, because I wasn't a huge fan of Colin. But I have probably rewatched the Colin Baker era of the show, well, a gazillion times. I've lost count at this point. It's such a fun era. It's short and sweet is what it is. And is a very drastic different personality compared to all the other Doctors. And followed one of the greatest stories of all time, The Caves of Androzani. The Twin Dilemma also had a tough act to follow, because that was an amazing story and is usually voted as the story of all of Doctor Who. Unfortunately, the Twin Dilemma didn't really fully deliver and sort of portrayed a very nasty version of the Doctor, especially after coming after the kind-hearted Fifth Doctor. A Doctor that strangles his companion in the very first episode is not really everyone's cup of tea. So, yeah, he didn't have the best start, but he's got some really great stories, such as Vengeance on Varos, with an amazing villain in Syl. You've also got The Two Doctors, which is a great multi-Doctor story. You've got Revelation of the Daleks, and he's even got the Big Trial of a Time Lord saga as well. So I think Colin Baker deserves more love. I think his is one of the most underrated eras of the show's history. And I'm putting him now in Fantastic. For me, Colin Baker is brilliant. And that's just my personal opinion. The Seventh Doctor, played by Sylvester McCoy. Sylvester McCoy, again, is another Doctor that if you'd asked me before, I probably would have said, again, probably down here. Sometimes the only choices you have are bad ones, but you still have to choose. Because I could not click with his era at all. I wasn't a big fan of his theme tune. I wasn't a massive fan of his manipulation of his companions, specifically Ace. Found him to be a bit too cruel. And a lot of his stories just seemed a bit underwhelming to me at the time. But the more I've watched them, I've really grown to love the vast majority of his era. I love Paradise Towers from his first season. I think it's really, really fun. It's a very goofy story, but you can't help but smile all the way through it. Season 25, his second season, I think is all class. Remembrance of the Daleks is a cult classic. The Happiness Patrol with the sinister Candyman is brilliant. Silver Nemesis is a bit of a lackluster Cyberman story, but again, is a fun watch. And then the series ends on a high with The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. And then even in his last series, he's got a cult classic in The Curse of Fenric, and battles the Master again in the very last story of the classic series Survival. So I feel like Sylvester McCoy now, for me, moves up to where there's hope. Where there's tears, there's hope. I can't quite say for me that he's fantastic, but I do think that he's at least a decent Doctor. I think all of the Doctors are decent. There's not a Doctor that I hate. But there is obviously ones that I prefer over the others. So I think that's fair for me and Sylvester McCoy. The next one is difficult. We've got Paul McGann. Now, Paul McGann, the Eighth Doctor. If you don't listen to Big Finish, there's very little to go on for the Eighth Doctor. he's only had one proper story on screen, and that's in the TV movie in 1996, where he also shared part of his screen time with Sylvester McCoy, because the regeneration doesn't actually take place until about 15 to 20 minutes into the story. So he doesn't have a lot of time to make an impact. And then since then, he has appeared in a little short, which is about 5 minutes or so, called Night of the Doctor, which aired before the 50th anniversary, finally giving us the regeneration of the 8th Doctor. And then he recently came back in The Power of the Doctor, the 13th Doctor's finale, playing one of the Guardians of the Edge. And he's just brilliant, which luckily for me, I have listened to a lot of The Big Finish. I've listened to Dark Eyes. I've listened to individual stories like The Chimes of Midnight and Terra Firma. I've also listened to the Time War saga, and I think he is amazing as the Doctor. And I'm gutted that he's not had more on-screen appearances. And for that reason, I'm going to put him in Fantastic. I mean, he's just brilliant. His personality is superb, and I've recently met him at a Comic-Con, and he's a lovely person to talk to. So I'm really hoping he comes to another Comic-Con near me again, because I would love to talk to him again. So that's it for the classic series. We now move on to the modern era of the show. Starting off with a Doctor that when the modern series came back in 2005, he didn't even exist. He only came into existence in 2013. And it was mainly to fill in a bit of a gap left open by Christopher Eccleston, who couldn't return to the role for the 50th anniversary. So they had to introduce a new incarnation of the Doctor, known as the War Doctor, who is the Doctor that all of these Doctors choose to forget, because he did a deed so evil, so undoctor-like, that they had to cloud it and hide it away from their minds and choose to ignore him, pretend he doesn't exist. But I think John Hurt is a very, very good Doctor. I've not heard a lot, so I can't personally put him higher than this. I'm going to straight away put him in Where There's Tears, There's Hope. I've only listened to one of his Big Finish box sets. And obviously I've seen Day of the Doctor, where he is brilliant. But I just wish there was more. Obviously now, unfortunately, after John Hurt passed away, he no longer personally does the Big Finish War Doctor stories, but they are still going underway with someone else, and he's doing a terrific job. So I will have to take a listen to some of those, and hopefully my opinion will change. But John Hurt's War Doctor is a very, very good Doctor, but there's just not enough for me to go on to put him any higher than middle of the road. Christopher Eccleston's 9th Doctor, for me, is going into You may be a Doctor, but I am the Doctor, the original, you might say. Christopher Eccleston's 9th Doctor is fantastic, to coin a phrase. He is fantastic. He brought the show back to life. If it wasn't for him, none of these would have existed. If the show wasn't successful with him. He was just brilliant, and he had to, bring Doctor Who to new audiences. He had to do a very difficult job after a long break of no Doctor Who content, on screen that is anyway. And he did a brilliant job, and he's supposed to be playing a war-torn Doctor. So someone who's almost suffering with PTSD after the events of the Time War, and he's got to find his humanity again. Because he starts off a bit like the first Doctor does, where he's almost callous. He's not very caring. He's willing to just take his companions to see their planet's death. The very first journey in the TARDIS for his companion Rose Tyler, he takes her to watch her planet basically burn and thinks nothing of it. I mean, Doctor, it's a little bit cruel. But he does grow as the series progresses, and he sort of regains that humanity. And for that, I think he does an amazing job. I would love to meet him at a Comic-Con. He is on my bucket list, as is a lot of other Doctors as well. But yeah, he had to go there because he sold it for me. And I'm gutted that we've only got one season with him. I have recently been buying the Big Finish box sets of the 9th Doctor. However, I'm still missing the first one, so I'm waiting for that before I dive in, because I'd like to listen to them in order if I can. But yeah, so that is the Ninth Doctor. Next, we have the 10th Doctor, played by David Tennant. Now, this one is going to be a bit of a controversial one, because I have never really been a massive fan of David Tennant's initial run as the Doctor. I'm saying that because of what's to come here. Yeah, the 10th Doctor for me, he just felt a bit too... He felt a bit too human. He sort of like slipped away from his alien roots, you know, and season 2 was a bit of a tough watch. He does have some really good stories in his era. You know, springs to mind The Impossible Planet and Satan Pit. I really love those stories. Rise of the Cybermen, Age of Steel, The Waters of Mars, I think is perfect, is a brilliant story. But for me personally, he's actually going to be the first Doctor that's actually going to go into... I don't know. I feel like, yeah, people are going to hate me for this. He's actually going to go into sometimes the only choices you have are bad ones, but you still have to choose. Please don't hate me for this. And like I said, it means nothing in terms of, you know, I think every Doctor's great. It's just he personally, if someone was to ask me what story of Doctor Who you want to put on the TV, I would probably choose one of these over watching a David Tennant initial run. And that's just my personal opinion. Moving swiftly on to the 11th Doctor then. I love the 11th Doctor. I think the 11th Doctor is fantastic. Matt Smith also had big shoes to fill because David Tennant, even though I've not been a massive fan of his Doctor, he has the same sort of fame as the 4th Doctor in the Doctor Who universe. Is the 4th and 10th Doctors are considered to be the Doctors. The 4th Doctor is considered to be the Doctor of the classic series, with the 10th Doctor considered to be the Doctor of the modern era of the show. So Matt Smith had some big shoes to fill. So I think he did a really, really good job. And recently, me and my fiance, we did a rerun. We sat down and binged all of the modern era. We're currently on the 12th Doctor's era, but we obviously had to sit through the 11th Doctor's era again. And on rewatch, there's loads of stories that I originally considered not the best. I actually quite like them now. Especially season 6, because I really wasn't a fan of season 6. With the whole Amy's pregnant arc and River Song killing the Doctor. But I've really grown to like a lot of those stories now, like the Doctor's wife, the Rebel, Flesh and Almost People. The Doppelganger two-parter is brilliant. I love The Girl Who Waited, where there's 2 Amy Ponds, an old and a young one. I just think he's a really good Doctor, and he's got very Troughton-esque features to him. Matt Smith goes back to those alien roots, where he can switch from being strict to being the clown. And just as a bit of a side note, I do slightly prefer his season 7B attire, as opposed to his main core tweed jacket, bow tie look. I do prefer his 7B look personally. But Matt Smith for me is fantastic and does a really, really good job in the role. The 12th Doctor, played by Peter Capaldi, he's going straight into, you may be a Doctor, but I am the Doctor, the original, you might say. So as you can see, this is the top 3 now, so they're the Doctors that are going into the top 3 slot. Peter Capaldi, his Doctor, wow, what can I say? His Doctor for me is very classic series. For me, he is the best of the modern era Doctors. I love his arc that he goes through. Again, he goes through another 1st Doctor / 9th Doctor arc. His first season, he's very alien. He's very stubborn. He's cruel almost to a lot of people. He lacks emotion as well. But he doesn't like hugging. But then come season 10, his 3rd season, you can see him open up. You can see him cry. You see him hug his companions. You see him truly fear and care for those in need. And it's just amazing to see the arc that he goes through. And he's got probably one of my favourite stories in Doctor Who history in his era, and that's World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls, which brings back the return of the Mondasian Cybermen and is the first multi-master story on screen. And I think that's just brilliant. So Peter Capaldi, for me, is top class. And the 12th Doctor, Bill and Nardole as a TARDIS team is my favourite TARDIS team of the modern era. For the classic series, my favourite TARDIS team is the 4th Doctor, Harry and Sarah from season 12. But yeah, for the modern era, it's definitely the 12th Doctor, Bill and Nardole. Okay, now we move on to Jodie Whittaker. Now, this Doctor caused a lot of controversy. It was actually announced on my birthday back when she was first announced on the 15th of July during Wimbledon. I remember watching it on TV and thinking, oh my goodness, we're actually having a woman as the Doctor? And to be fair, I was very optimistic. I really liked the idea of having a female to play the Doctor, especially since in the previous season they were alluding to this big time. The Master says a line in The Doctor Falls where he turns to the Doctor and says, is the future going to be all girl? And the Doctor says, we can only hope. And this is exactly what happened then 2 stories later. We got Jodie Whittaker. And again, if you had asked me after watching season 11, I probably would have said that Jodie Whittaker would be about here in the sometimes the only choices you have are bad ones category. But she has really, really grown on me. I wouldn't quite say she's fantastic, but I would definitely pop her into the where there's tears, there's hope category. Because there's some stories that I genuinely have loved, because my fiance at the time had never watched the Jodie Whittaker era. So recently we decided to sit down and watch the Jodie Whittaker era together. And she really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed it. A lot more than I did before. Season 11 is still a little bit of a hard watch, but we really enjoyed Flux, and then the Series 13 specials, Eve of the Daleks, Legend of the Sea Devils, and The Power of the Doctor. And there's some really good stuff in there. Eve of the Daleks is probably my favourite New Who Dalek story apart from Dalek from season 1. I love the time loop. I think it's a great concept for a story. And it's done really, really well. So, yeah, I think that's probably where I'm going to put Jodie's 13th Doctor. I have heard that she is now going to be doing some Big Finish as well. So I look forward to maybe listening to some of those, because I think the 13th Doctor does deserve more. So hopefully they will be good too. Now, I did incorporate Joe Martin's Fugitive Doctor into this list as well. And I think personally, for me, I'm going to put her down here. I'm not being mean. The reason I don't put her the same as I do for John Hurt is because at the time, there was so much more you could have done with this character. They finally brought back the Time Lord Essence trapped in a fob watch plotline that they did for the 10th Doctor. And we've been screaming and crying out for the Rani for years. So this was the perfect opportunity to have the Rani. So I feel as though it was a very big missed opportunity. And so for her to be the Doctor, it's sort of, I don't know, it was very underwhelming to me. And then obviously you've got the whole thing of it changes the lore of the show, where now Hartnell is not necessarily the first Doctor and she probably came before him. That doesn't bother me. Personally, as an actress, and in terms of what she does on screen, I'd probably say she's probably even in Fantastic for that. She's really, really good. But in terms of her, the concept of her, and what we could have had, I think personally, she belongs down here because of that. Like I said, in terms of acting, she'd be up here. But in terms of how I feel it could have gone otherwise, like she could have been the Rani or a new Time Lord. She didn't have to be the Doctor. And it just causes more questions than answers. I think she belongs down here. Now, most recently, we did get the return of David Tennant, who is playing the 14th incarnation of the Doctor now here as well. And yeah, I do count 14 and 10 as separate incarnations. I'm not of the belief that it's just simply 10 again. I truly believe it's a different Doctor. That's just my opinion personally. And I like to see him that way because then you get to see more growth. And for me, the 14th Doctor's fantastic. This is what I meant by don't hate me here, because David Tennant does shine greatly in the 60th anniversary specials. While Blue Yonder in particular is currently, While Blue Yonder is my favourite of the new RTD era of the show. I think it's brilliant, very emotional. The speech that the Doctor and Donna go through when talking about the consequences of the flux and seeing the Doctor tear himself apart and tear up. He cries, he smacks the wall in frustration and anger. Oh, it's brilliant. The acting is superb. And I'm not going to go into details on it here in this video because I think that's a separate video, but I'm not a massive fan of the concept of bi-regeneration, and that kind of spoilt the giggle for me a little bit. But up until then, I think his regeneration, the regeneration part, was superb, and it was exactly what I wanted for the 10th Doctor, because the 10th Doctor goes out a little bit of a wimp, in my opinion, but 14 makes up for it a little bit. He goes out saying the line that I wanted 10 to say. He goes out saying, allons-y, you know, let's go, he's ready to go, he's finally ready to give up this face, and that is perfect. It's like the arc that 10 should have had. 14 said, hold my beer, I'm finishing it off for you. And he does in style. And I love his outfit. I know it takes elements from the 10th Doctor, and that was kind of the idea, but 14's outfit is way better than the 10th Doctor's outfit, in my opinion. The blue coat is superb. I love that blue coat. I even have the 14th Doctor's cosplay, which I'll be wearing at a Comic-Con this weekend in Wales. But yeah, the 14th Doctor is brilliant. Love the 14th Doctor, and that's why he's in fantastic. And then finally, we have our current Doctor, played by Ncuti Gatwa, who I will be meeting at London Film and Comic Con this winter, down in November, I think it is. So I'm really looking forward to that. His first season, I mean, now that it's over, we can finally give our thoughts on the 15th Doctor. He's difficult to really place. I think for me, I'm going to put him here in Where There's Tears, There's Hope, because there is some really good aspects of the 15th Doctor, and he has some decent stories like Boom and The Devil's Chord, and part one of the two-part finale I think is brilliant. But for me, I don't know, I haven't had a proper moment yet where I've been able to go, yes, the Doctor is in the house. He's had Doctor moments, but nothing that really digs deep for me. I'm still yet to find that. And also, I mean, I don't hate that he cries in every episode, because other Doctors have been emotional too, and it's good for him to show his emotions. I just think it takes the impact out of some scenes if he's cried, you know, he cried last episode, he cried the episode before that, you know, it takes the impact out of then in a really serious moment, him bursting out in tears. I think, yeah, it's just... And also, since he's supposed to be a Doctor that, as far as I was aware, was supposed to be over the trauma that 14 is going through, it sort of is a bit weird because it almost like backsteps again. But I do love 15. I love his wardrobe as well. The outfit in this image here is my favourite, but he has some fantastic costumes. I think it's brilliant. And Ncuti is doing an amazing job. I just think the writing for him needs to be a little bit better. But yeah, as it stands, that is my tier list of ranking all of the Doctors. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, please be sure to like and subscribe. And I will see you again for some more Doctor Who content. The next video on this channel will probably be a vlog coming from the ICC in Wales for Wales Comic Con Monopoly events. I am hoping to be dressing up as the 14th Doctor, and my fiance will be going as the Toymaker. So hopefully I will be able to get some footage for you all, and that will possibly be the next video, and that should be out either Sunday or Monday next week. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have an amazing day.